talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes.
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuits.
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary Dog.
Flimpson and Bluesball.
Futurama.
Good evening. This is TV Party Tonight, and I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is The Good Cop, brought to you by the good people at Netflix.
I don't know about good.
3 Arts Entertainment and Andy Breckman Productions. Joining me to look at this possibly canceled too soon Netflix one-season wonder is the Toxic Masculine, Mr. Pat Mullin. How do you do, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark. I'm excited for this one.
How are you enjoying your 4th of July? What did you do today?
So, had a little party, had a little drink about an hour ago.
You, what is it? What do you drink? The Nasgazet, or however you pronounce it?
I'm sorry, the what?
What is it you're drinking these days, Mr. Iron Eagle?
Well, it depends. Today was a light day. Today was a lot of volleyball in the sun, so we're sticking with some Michelobes.
I had a lot of coffee, hit waters, and chemo. That's what my party was today.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah. But let's get to it. Now, The Good Cop debuted on Netflix in September of 2018 and then was promptly canceled 2 months later. And I haven't done a tremendous amount of reading on this, but so I don't know why exactly it was canceled. It can't be because it wasn't critically it was pretty well received. I don't know how many people actually clicked on the thing to watch it. But yeah, Netflix has like a weird reputation for canceling some things and hanging on to others with no rhyme or reason. Do you have any idea what brought them to canceling this?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So, I was very excited when the show premiered. I probably like Tony Danza more than most, although I have a realistic perception of Tony Danza, which separates me from most of the fan base for him. That being said, if you look at the majority of Netflix original television show programming, they're not broad appeal shows. They're very niche-oriented shows. The Good Cop was not a niche-oriented audience show. It was a broad appeal show that you would see on a network as a sitcom. And ultimately, that was apparently why Netflix was not satisfied with it, because its appeal they felt was too broad and didn't really hone in on any particular audience that it would draw, according to how Netflix felt about it. Thus, the decision was made not to renew it for a second season.
I don't know. I really enjoyed this. I know when it first debuted, you were pretty gung-ho about it and wanting to talk about it when you first started watching the series. And I am a longtime fan of Tony Danza as well. I enjoyed him on Taxi. I enjoyed him on Who's the Boss. I grew up watching Who's the Boss,
You know when I didn't enjoy him, Mark?
When didn't you enjoy him?
When he had a talk show.
I don't even remember that. I remember the Chevy Chase talk show lasted probably maybe less than a month before that got canceled. I don't remember Tony Danza having one.
This was a kind of a different kind of bad.
Okay.
Because it was very... It made him seem very unlikable because it made him seem very phony. And, so there would be things where he would pause and pander to the audience for applause, and they would do it out of oh, he's pausing, let's clap. And the things he would say, I'm not one of those people who mocks people for thoughts and prayers going out to people, but whenever he said it, it sounded very disingenuous. And, we want to give our thoughts and prayers out there, so it was so unlikable, this show, mainly because the people who did it don't understand his appeal is not as a witty, bantering talk show host. And they tried to force him to be one. I'd almost compare his talk show persona to Tyra Banks, if you ever watched her show.
only in passing, but I know what you're saying. I'm guessing this was a lot of studio control, a lot of executive notes, instead of just letting Tony be Tony.
It very much seemed that way, and I know you're a fan of what used to be the Opie and Anthony show, and so was I. Their favorite target for a good 2 years was the Tony Danza show.
I'm not surprised.
To the point where they sent out men in the street to get people on the line for the Tony Danza show on the phone to think they were talking to Tony as Anthony busted out an impression, and they would say horrific things to these people to make them think it was Danza saying it. If you've never heard this, you need to go onto YouTube and listen to Opie and Anthony Tony Danza prank call.
Okay.
They greatly upset a woman from Surgeonsville, New Jersey named Joan.
I will have to give this a spin while I'm killing time at the hospital. I'll put that on the list.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers to our friend Mark there.
What I love about Tony Danza, and I know this had to be part of the appeal for you. You and I grew up roughly around the same area. I grew up on Long Island. You grew up in part of your life, and at least part of your life was in Brooklyn. The part of your life is in Jersey. And this is every Italian male I knew. Tony Danza, as this character, Anthony Tony Caruso, is like, other than my dad. My dad isn't quite the Italian mook that I grew up around everywhere else, including my grandfather. But these guys that were very Italian, very always looking for another way to do things, very much like this Tony. Now, this Tony has all the charm and sociopathy that some of these guys were missing, but you get my drift. This was a lot of the men that I grew up around.
And again, it's a little bit different than what we're used to from him, because he's not just nice guy, cab driver, housekeeper. He has an edge to him in this that he hasn't really ever had before in a character.
Yeah.
Very rarely. He had it in the remake of 12 Angry Men, but that's really the only thing I can say I've seen that kind of behavior from him in. And it's a shame because he does it well.
Yeah, this one had me, kind of oscillating between getting a very unlikable vibe from this character to the point where I wanted the Josh Groban, his son, Tony Jr., TJ, to just punch him in the throat a few times. But then other times he has such charm and such charisma that I couldn't help but be in love with the guy. And I think that was at least part of the appeal of the show, was that Tony Danza has this great, has this way of attracting an audience, which is why, canceling it was so maddening for me. Like you had a perfect vehicle for this guy. I was late to this show, obviously. It's 2019 now, almost a year later. And I tell you, I wish I had watched it when you first pitched it, because I really, really enjoyed this series. I have to say, I watched all 10 episodes within the last 2 days, and only one of them I was my mind was somewhere else, and I wasn't paying that close attention. But the rest of them, I was as a police procedural and a dramedy, and a bit of a character piece, I thoroughly enjoyed this. So let's break it down, shall we?
And away we go.
So the setup here is that Tony Danza's Anthony Caruso Sr. is a cop that's been paroled from prison. He did 7 years due to corruption, and again, he's always looking for a quick fix or a way to get around things. He's a rule breaker. He's always looking for the shortcut, as it were. But again, he's got high likability, high charm, all of that, and so he gets away with it to a degree. And then you have his son, who utterly disappointed by his father and embarrassed and everything else, and so he's trying to do things the ultra right way. He is the exact opposite of Tony Sr., and so you have this odd couple dynamic, and this is set within the police procedural genre, where every episode, there is a murder that occurs for the most part, and it's a whodunit as they work their way through it, and there's different angles on how they do it. But that's the basic setup. So overall, what did you think of the let's talk about the relationship between the two Tonys for to start with. What did you think of the odd couple dynamic?
So it was interesting that before we even get into that, you have the two stars of the show principally are Tony Danza and Josh Groban, and to sing the theme song, they elect Tony Danza.
They did an entire episode of him singing, him singing with Bob Saget.
That's right. And we'll get to My Funny Valentine in a moment. I know that the initial thought when you meet these two characters is that, oh geez, they're trying way too hard to make them too different. But I think the dynamic gets stronger with each passing episode. And again, part of that has to do with the fact that Groban does his part really well in terms of, on one hand, he's a very stuffy, antisocial or socially awkward, kind of not the guy you want to hang out with, versus his dad, who's life of the party, fun, witty, everything like that. But as you watch the show and you see how he does his police work, you gain very high respect for the character as far as, wow, he's a really good cop. And there are those tender moments mixed in with the father-son dynamic that, they reference Tony's late wife and TJ's late mother, and they have certain bonding instances through the show. And so I think it's a dynamic where maybe initially people didn't give it a chance because they didn't want to see it play out. I think it got stronger and better in each episode, and I think that says a lot for the chemistry that the two leads had with each other.
And we're going to skip around a little bit here, but the episode with the girl on the ski lift, who killed the guy in the ski lift, I think really highlights a lot of the dynamics and interplay in their relationship, because when you look at the two on its face, you would 9 out of 10 times take Josh Groban's side, because Tony's again always looking for that shortcut. And he's clearly doing the wrong thing in almost every one of these situations. And in this one, Josh Groban sticking up for an alleged cop killer in a area, in a setting that is filled with cops who only see it from one point of view. A cop got killed, and and then this scumbag sticking up for her. Why would he do that? And and even Tony, who's had his son defend him and take him in and forgive him for his past transgressions and everything else, says things like, "I disowned you yesterday," and I'm almost ashamed of what you're doing. She killed a cop. Why are you going out of your way to defend her, and all of this other stuff? That was the one episode where of all the things Tony does throughout the series, and he does some pretty ridiculous things. Like that to me was the absolute worst. How could you say that to your son after everything he's done for you and this was a pretty late episode. This is in the second half of the season. How could you possibly forget how often this character is right and how often he's his now in this one he happened to be wrong. And,
how much he has put up with from you.
Sure.
When you were arrested for corruption, he now works in that same, not necessarily his department, but he is now also a cop who is always going to have you hanging over his head.
And I was starting to say, he has this reputation, even within the confines of the series itself, for always being right. In the very first episode, he's framed for a murder, and when he says, "I didn't do it," he's dead on, and he's able to prove his innocence. This is a guy who should have built up enough cachet on his word that when he says, "She didn't do it, and I can figure this out," the father, should have had more faith in him, and he doesn't. And then he wants to take credit for it towards the end of the episode, which I thought was so Tony and very hilarious. But yeah, that one really got to me. That was kind of an emotional moment for me as a viewer, where I was like, why? The writers, I think, did a really good job of affecting the audience that way.
Yeah, I would agree, because again, part of it is that Tony's so friggin' charming, and give him credit for it. You're not supposed to like him in certain instances, and they kind of have to be heavy-handed with you to remind you, oh, hey, remember that he was a corrupt cop, FYI.
Right. And he does, and it's not like the corrupt part of his nature is now gone. Like from scene one. I mean, if you go through these, you know, the supermodel secret, he's easily taken in by the supermodel who is just using him. Yeah. Who's absolutely just using him to find the phone so she can delete evidence of a hit that she's ordered.
Which may be my favorite episode for the reason that he's fully aware of this and confesses it as much to a priest and still is looking for absolution just so he can sleep with her guilt-free.
Right. Though he does, I think there are 2 times he goes and sees the priest. That's one of them, and then there's the one later. And it's not that he's looking for the priest for advice. He wants the priest to give him permission. And the priest's like, "No, this is a murder, and you have to report it." Okay, but what would you do if you were me? Like, Tony, go to the police. Those are some funny ass scenes. Here is another good one. Who is the ugly German lady? I mean, he's kind of the thief with the heart of gold type of a character, and in this one, you know, his relationship with this prisoner because the prisoner protected him while he was in prison outweighs the need to do the right thing, and this really is a series that sometimes asks the question: what is the right thing? Is the right thing following the rules, or honoring your relationship to a person in the face of the rules? And it's not always as cut and dry. And in this particular case, you know, this guy's being framed for a murder that he didn't commit. There's a lot of that, by the way. There's a lot of frame jobs in this series, which kind of got on my nerves after a while. But I guess they got to come up with something, because if they lean too heavily on one or two things, it becomes a little sitcomish.
And again, I think one of the things, though, is that it's not trying to overstate what it is. Like, hey, we're letting you know this is the routine. This is what you're going to have in this show. We're just going to try to do it a little bit differently each time and not throw you a curveball too much.
Yeah. I think the one episode, like I said, I enjoyed almost all of these. I think the one episode I wasn't particularly interested in, and I think I zoned out, was Will the Good Cop Bowl 300. And this is the one where they're basically in the bowling alley to see who killed the bowling alley attendant, and so Josh Groban has to join the team as part of the as part of the case, and he can't bowl worth the shit. So they have the forensic guy unbeknownst to him, build him a ball that is remote controlled. And I think and then of course the son is taken in by his sudden ability to bowl, which isn't true, and he wants to become a professional bowler. And of course Tony tries to talk him out of it until he realizes this could make them rich, and suddenly all ethics go out the window. And I think after a while I was just like, ugh, I'm too tired for this. And I lost interest. But that was the only one. The rest of them I thought were pretty solid. What did you think of the bowling one?
I appreciated the fact that they wanted to do something different with TJ.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a little bit different of a character we see from him now, where he does get a little confident, a little cocky, a little full of himself, as opposed to the very by-the-book TJ that we've gotten used to. And so that was interesting to me and a little bit fun. The episode as a whole, I would agree, it's more of a dud than a stud, and probably one of the weaker, if not the weakest ones of the 10.
The show structure is formulaic. There's the presentation of the problem. There are obstacles and figuring things out. There's the twist, where either someone is framed or they're fingering the wrong person or whatever the case may be. There's always that aha moment that TJ has. There's usually a B plot involving Tony Sr. trying to get over on somebody, and then there's the resolution. That made the show a bit predictable, and I'm not like a Robert Winfrey where within seconds of the show's credits being, the show's opening credits being over, I figured out who did it. I like to just kind of watch open-mindedly and just sort of let it all play out in front of me and go, okay, I'm entertained here. I closed my eyes and I didn't see the drop coming in the roller coaster. It's fine. But this was so formulaic that almost 9 out of 10 times I knew who the murderer was well before the ending was over because I could tell where we were in the formula. How did that work for you?
I'm fine with something, again, when it's not trying to be more than it is. This was a very simple police procedural with a little bit of comedy in it and a basic formula that was going to make it understood to its audience what it was watching. And I get that it's not going to be for everybody, especially people who are more into the, I don't want to be able to figure things out immediately. I want you to have them guessing and trying to figure it out. And I get that, but again, a broad appeal show is simple for a lot of reasons, so it can appeal to the most audience that it has available to it. And for me, it was fine. And again, I think shows like this are largely reliant on the actors within them to make the material more than what it is. And I think they did that.
No, I would agree. I mean, when I think about your biggest hits on just, 5 biggest hits that I can think of that were broad appeal audiences, they had long runs on television and high numbers to the point where they only got canceled because the actors themselves didn't want to do it anymore. Friends, Seinfeld, The Big Bang Theory being the first 3 that I could think of. They ran forever, and these were not exactly written at high levels. This was, when you say broad appeal, boy was this broad. So, I get that, and I get that they pretty much had a firm formulaic structure to hang some pretty good acting on. They also, we talked about Tony Danza's charm, and I'll let you sort of peek in here with any more on their relationship in just a second, but I do want to move on to the supporting cast. A lot of times with shows like these, there's always the main actors or one actor. When we talk about Fuller House, not every actor is equal in the charm department. So a lot of the shows are carried by 1 or 2 actors who really pull everybody else up with them. But in this one, I think everybody is pretty strong. The 3 supporting characters in this are Isaiah Whitlock Jr., most notably the state senator from The Wire. He was the one that famously would say "shit." And in this one, he's the tired, burnt out, very sleepy detective.
Counting down the days to retirement, literally.
474, I believe, is what he was up to.
Does that include today?
Yes, it does. I thought he was brilliant in this. I really enjoyed him. When you first meet him, he's sleeping in the car waiting for TJ to get to the crime scene. He's like, they could pull your badge for this. He's like, and wouldn't that be a terrible shame? I could retire early. Okay, we know who he is. Then we have a character played by Monica Barbaro, who is Cora Vasquez, who starts out as they call her an inspector. I thought she was a parole officer. And then she, very quickly within the first couple episodes, takes the detective exam and ends up in the All City Detective Squad, along with the rest of the cast. And I thought she was great. I thought she played a good counter to TJ. When we talk about female and male leads, the first thing that comes up usually is sexual tension, and they even on almost a meta level address that in the ski lift. No, not the ski lift episode. The the last episode, Who Cut Mrs. Aykroyd in Half, where they have to act as a couple. This is in the wake of her
almost marriage.
Yeah, and the Will Cora Get Married, which was 2 episodes prior. So I thought Josh Groban and her also had a very good opposites attract sexual tension thing going. I thought the 2 of them lit up the screen really well and interacted well together. I thought her addition as part of the one of the homicide detectives, I thought she seemed competent enough. She's a very pretty lady, so I thought she ticked all the boxes. And then you have what's the character's name here? Frank Whale. No, hang on. Bill Kottkamp as Ryan, who's the crime analyst. And he was fine. He had some very funny lines here and there. I thought he was a good supporting cast member. What did you think of, I guess we'll start with Monica Barbaro.
I liked her. Definitely not a Mary Sue as Cora. She initially started off, like you said, as Tony's parole officer, did the whole detective thing, but her more combative relationship initially with TJ, as far as not even just methods but personalities, was fun. There was very obviously tension, chemistry there, but it was just enough where it was never predictable to me, and I liked it. I liked the interplay. I thought she presented a positive, strong female character, which is not seen well done to me a lot often. So I was happy for it.
Yeah, in a lot of television these days, men are made to look like boobs and women are made to be Mary Sues. And I thought they avoided that pretty well here. I thought we have fallible characters that are in need of redemption, but are also characters you want to root for. There wasn't anyone, I mean, I even wanted to root for Tony. It was always kind of a, please do the right thing, you nut job kind of a thing. But, you know, I was always rooting for him. I was always rooting for TJ. I rooted for her. You know, when there's the possibility she's going to get thrown off a window, I wasn't going, please do it. She wasn't a shrew. I rooted for Isaiah Whitlock's character, Burl Loomis. You know, I wanted him. He didn't come. He's not like the portrayal of, oh gosh, what's the Batman detective's name? That
Jim Gordon or Harvey Bullock?
Bullock. He's not like a Bullock where he's so lost and corrupted that he's irredeemable. You know, he came across as a guy who I think is made better by Josh Groban's character, and I think he's still trying. Like, he's tired, but he's hanging on. He's trying to do his level best at this point. You know, he isn't actively fucking up investigations, and when he drops the ball, he's trying desperately to correct it, even if it's just to save his own ass. He at least comes across as redeemable. You know, he comes across as having integrity.
I would agree. Where on the flip side, you have Wendell, who is maybe my favorite character in the show besides Tony.
Ah, yes, from Rescue Me.
Yeah, John Scurdy.
Yeah, he was kind of a Tony Jr. in this, where it was like, meh. You know, I think
his
Tony needed a pal around.
His character was really a plot device for Tony to engage in stupid behavior.
Yeah.
But John is one of those guys who plays those parts very well.
Yes.
And it is, again, one of those guys who has a certain ability to just make you buy into what he's doing, which he did on Rescue Me, which is probably what he's best known for, because he made it through almost the entirety of the run of that show. But he just has that type of character to him where he's very enjoyable in those instances. And I think he's in 5 out of the 10 episodes, but usually when he shows up, I'm like, okay, I'm about to laugh.
You know, what's funny about him, I think of a Patton Oswalt bit where he's talking about Brian Dennehy at the premiere of Batman Begins, and, you know, Patton Oswalt's kind of picking out at the buffet stand, and Brian Dennehy comes up behind him, slaps him on the back, and says, "Character actors, who gives a fuck if we get fat?" and takes a plate of food. You know, I look at John Scurdy, and that's what I think of. You know, here's a guy who's such a good character actor, and he's really good at playing that, you know, either devil or angel on your shoulder best friend type, that nothing else matters. Like, his physical appearance and everything else, it's who cares? You know, he's that kind of an actor. You know what I mean?
And I think for anybody who's worked any type of blue-collar job in their lifetime, they've met a guy who John has played in a show.
So, yeah, we were talking also about Monica Barbaro's Cora. I really like the episodes where she was the focus, you know, especially the Will Cora Get Married. Again, that was one that was dangerously... I told her, I said before, she's not like a shrew type character, and she's not, you know, all hashtag Me Too, or Time's Up or any of those things. I felt they wrote a strong female character for her without it being that modern, overbearing female character where pandering. Yeah, I thought this was very excellent writing for a female character, and I thought her and Josh Groban actually had really excellent sexual chemistry.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, I think in terms of the show's predictability, like we talked about, where it is the police procedural, follows the murder that happens, whatever the frame up is, et cetera, et cetera. I think for them to keep what they had going was very well done.
And had there been a second season, would you have seen the two of them? They were starting to hint at them getting together between the ski lift episode and the hotel episode, the apartment episode, the season finale, the series finale now. Did you see them getting together in the second or the third season, or do you think they would have kind of kept up that will they, won't they, Sam and Diane kind of thing? And even Sam and Diane finally got together. I don't know why I seem to fall on that.
Even Tony and Angela got together.
That's right. Tony and Angela did get together by the end of the series.
So I would have probably had them go out on a date in the second season, only for some type of comedic murder to happen and them to have to divert it to work. And they each kind of pack it away as like, yeah, timing was off, but there's lingering feelings, but they each date other people. I probably would have had TJ get a girlfriend this year just to kind of not have it be the typical, the girl finds somebody again and blah, blah, blah. I probably would have had TJ dating somebody and had Cora kind of insecure about it and have kind of Tony be the nudge in that situation.
Yeah, I'm glad. Speaking of which, I'm glad they didn't make TJ a complete eunuch in the first season. That they actually gave him at least one or two opportunities to be with other women, and not made him just a complete, utter, ballless virgin eunuch type of character. Where it's like, come on, he's not that bad looking a guy,
He's Josh Groban. Take the glasses off of him, Clark Kent him. He's Josh Groban.
That could have been a funny thing, hey, maybe we'll get you some contact lenses and we'll take you shopping, and you're the best detective in the city. Have a little. I understand they tried to make him kind of an awkward, nerdy type, but come on, So I was glad, even with the ski lift stuff, where it was a total setup, that there were some opportunities for him to get laid. All right, so let's switch. So we've talked about the cast here. What were some of your? We'll kind of go over some of our favorite episodes, least favorite episodes, things we liked, didn't like, and then I think we'll wrap up here. Unless you have a whole lot of other burning desires, what were some of your favorite episodes here? Favorite murders?
Okay, so I was a big fan of Who Killed the Guy on the Ski Lift, which we mentioned. For a lot, and a lot of it, especially for what you just talked about, the development of TJ in that episode.
What killed me about that episode is that they noticed the notch on the knife immediately, and and I don't know if it was purposely done this way because they wanted to get across how nobody was willing to think this further down the road, think this through, that they. They wanted there to be so much doubt. But as soon as I saw the notch on there, I'm like, okay, crossbow. Like, it had to be. So when they finally got to the point where there was a drone with a bow on there, I'm like, yeah, I saw that one coming a mile away. Yeah, that was the only frustrating thing about that episode. And then I didn't think about this until after. But I could see that she was trying to get out of the apartment so fast and she was so cold to him that I was like, oh, she set him up, and then of course they go to resolve the leak issue, and I'm like, aha, she set him up, but she was setting him up the whole time.
Oh yeah, 100%. But again, it's not my favorite episode in the sense of how the crime broke down and how it was more a case of, oh look, TJ's a normal guy, he's going through normal guy stuff right now, and I'm feeling bad for him because he's being led astray by putting the you-know-what on a pedestal.
One of the 2 episodes later, actually, they had a run of good episodes here, because that's a good one. And then preceding that was did the TV star do it.
Yes.
Bob Saget plays such a good sociopath. I wish he would get more parts like that. Like, get him on Law and Order, get him on CSI, and just have him keep playing the same smarmy, sociopathic serial killer. He's so good at it.
He was fantastic. And it makes sense if you've ever seen him do stand-up that he could probably pull a part like this off. It's just so many people are used to and perceive him as the Bob Saget of Full House that he never gets a chance to do this stuff. But, man, he was great. The way he was playing everybody against each other, using his reputation as this wholesome guy to unleash this awful sociopathic human being who killed his, this girl at the beginning of the show. Really did everything he could to try to cover his tracks. Made a gimmick out of it with blowing up the car on his show. Like, it was really, really well done, and Bob deserves a lot of credit for how that came off.
I almost wish they didn't stick so strictly to the formula that occasionally the murder got the best of Josh Groban, and in this one he did. Like, I understand it's more satisfying to see that in every episode they get their man. Takes some of the punch out of these episodes for me. So the occasional one where the bad guy kind of gives him a wink at the end and says, maybe next time, and Josh Groban kind of, has egg on his face at the end of the episode, would have been much more satisfying, at least for me. I don't know how you see it, but this would have been a great one to have Bob Saget get away with it.
It would have, and to see him come back would have been a lot of fun. And that he never loses his show or, gets to hold that over TJ's head and they have to deal with it going forward. Like, this murderer is still on TV getting away with everything. Mm-hmm. That would have been fun. It would have been fun to examine that later on. But, unfortunately we weren't going to get that opportunity anyway.
Yeah. The other thing about this episode that he makes the same... So he approaches Bob Saget. He does it alone. He doesn't have backup. And then, of course, he gets pushed in a pool because he thinks he's wearing a wire, and the guy admits everything to him, but then says, even though I've now admitted this crime to you, it's my word against yours, and your word is now mud because you've been seen harassing me on TV. And I'm like, okay, this should be a learning, this should be a teaching moment for Josh Groban's character. So then, 2 episodes later, when the Will Cora get married, and again, he approaches the fiancé alone, not wearing a wire, knowing this guy is the shits, and is not being true. So you would think he would have learned to not approach the potential subject alone. You think that when he goes to the gym to confront the fiancé, that there's backup in case what had been happened. He got cracked in the head with a weight and then thrown into a sauna and nearly suffocated to death. And that I was kind of annoyed with. It was like, how do you, this smart of a guy, make that same mistake twice within 2 episodes? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was a little silly. The only thing I could imagine is that this may have been aired out of order. But even then, it's a 10-episode show. If you're going on the show being, say, in actuality, a week here, a week there, there's no way he still should not have jumped into that situation. But, now, to be fair and underscore it, he's acting more on emotion here than anything else, which is, for the most part, probably clear because of the relationship between him and Cora, or non-relationship at this point. But once he's into the fact that he thinks there's an actual crime going on here, he's still that neurotic nut where that neuroses should be taking over his actions, and that's what he should be guiding on, calling into the state, hey, I'm going to be here because I suspect this is going on. You could have somebody waiting for me. That would be great.
Yeah, or at the you don't have to wear a wire, but, have somebody within earshot, have somebody peering into the windows with binoculars, that sort of thing. Just going into it, I'm going to confront a suspect by myself. Wish me luck. Come on. You're supposed to be the smartest cop in the room, and if I can figure that out, why can't you? And I think that's one of the problems I have with the writing of this, is that, I always think about Welcome Back, Kotter. I don't know how much you remember about that show.
I remember most every episode.
So you know that there's one episode where the principal's giving Cotter shit about the crazy way he does things, and
Vice principal, and Cotter proves that what he's doing works. And then I remember another episode down the line where they're sitting on the floor, and the vice principal, almost word for word, gives him the same exact speech, except that he keeps doing the "it's wacky kooky" line, and Cotter never says, "Hey, could we not have collective amnesia? Could you give me some credit? I think I've earned it up to this point." Nope. We don't learn anything. We've gained no knowledge. We're exactly where we were several episodes prior, and that was always one of the limitations of a show like that. Christ, Archie Bunker evolved more than that show did. My God, Well, I mean, to be fair, we're dealing with a show about remedial high school students. Evolution is not their strong suit.
Sweat hogs, sir. Sweat hogs. It's a term I use still proudly. That being the case, though, I love the Bob Saget episode, other than the bit with him walking, confronting him alone. I thought was dumb. I enjoyed the ski lift twist. I really, because of the relationship between Josh Groban and Monica Barbaro, I enjoyed Will Cora Get Married. One of my favorite episodes, though, and like I said, episodes 6 through 10 were all really strong for me. I really enjoyed them. I thought they were, we talk about this in the Metal Hammer of Doom, that side A is usually better than side B. Side B gets a little samey. This one, the second half of the season, I thought was superior to the first half of the season, at least in my opinion. The Why Kill a Busboy, I thought was fantastic.
Oh, what fun that was!
And part of it is, and this is, and I think you'll know where I'm coming from. Being a kid from New York / New Jersey, we grew up with Frank Sinatra. It wasn't our music; it was our parents and grandparents. But you can't throw a rock in the tri-state area without hitting a Sinatra fan, and it was everywhere. If you've been to a wedding or a 50th anniversary party or some shit like that, 25th anniversary, Unforgettable, which I know is not Sinatra, but in New York, just so many standards of that era would get played at any kind of big gathering among the Italians. Probably even the Irish. They still did it at the weddings that I worked.
You're not going to some kind of either wedding anniversary
right,
or an older relative's birthday party without hearing standards from Sinatra, Dean Martin, Tony Bennett, your usual suspects.
Right. Yeah, the Rat Pack plus whatever. So, and I always, it's one of my favorite Family Guy episodes is the one with Frank Sinatra Jr. when they own a restaurant. So, first of all, some of the gags in that episode are fucking hysterical. But just the, I know Robert Winfrey is famous on this network for fucking hating Seth MacFarlane, but I find the guy singing at least to be very nice, and and when he sings that way, he tends to do a lot of the Rat Pack standards. It sounds great, and it makes me enjoy the episode surrounding it a lot more. And that's another one where they own an Italian restaurant, and we don't need to get into the silliness of that episode, but this one where Tony is trying to run this restaurant, but he's doing it in kind of the under the table Goomba way, and I sympathize because I've worked in many a restaurant in my time, and I've got a brother-in-law who used to work in restaurants. They're not easy to keep to code.
No, they are not.
So I sympathize. This was one of the few where I sympathize with Tony trying to do things, a little the off color way, and I laughed hard. I mean, I belly laughed where the couple's outside looking at the menu and they see the A, and then as they're looking, the A turns to a C, and they're like, ugh, and walked away. I'm like, oh. I don't know why they didn't go full on with that joke and just make it an F.
They should have. I mean, but again, I understand what they're trying to accomplish with this show.
The other thing I liked about it was the Terminator reference, and everyone thinks she's crazy. That's exactly, and that's more or less not. It wasn't a mistake; it was purposefully done. But I enjoyed the fact that they had that Terminator reference, and then the misdirection based on that. We'll kill two people with the same name to throw the scent off the guy we were really trying to kill. And that this was all about insider trading. I thought that was brilliant. That was a really fun twist.
Yeah, where you find out the whole idea was the boss boy had found the planted mic that they left at this table, and that's why he needed to go. And so they made it look like a robbery. And that there was a lot that went into that, but I give them credit for making it all make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy, oh my gosh, the fellow who created the show. Why can't I remember his name?
Breckman.
Andy Breckman. If you watched Monk, Andy Breckman was also the guy behind Monk. This episode felt very Monk to me, and I mean that in the best way possible.
Never got into Monk, but I've heard Psych is really good.
Psych is also funny. Coincidentally, I graduated from the same high school as Dule Hill.
Well, all right. Look at that little Pat Mullin trivia. So I've talked for a while here. You know, I've said several times that everything from 6 through 10 is just brilliant. The stuff before that, you know, here's some of the negatives I found about the show. Will Big Tony roll over? Him grinning ear to ear, saying, "I'm never going to testify." Like I was at that point, I wish the sun had just thrown him out the window. like it was like Tony oscillates between being a charmish rogue to just a shitty human being.
Yeah, and just a butthole.
Yeah, and this was and the thing of it is that when he's really shitty, it takes away my enjoyment of the episode, almost because this is like, and I said something very similar about Captain America: Civil War, where I don't think the reactions from the other characters are true in the moment. I said during that one, when you have John Hurt, I believe it is, who's playing General Ross, saying, going over all of these alleged mistakes by the Avengers, and it's like, these were things that weren't the Avengers' fault and they were just reacting, or it was Tony's fault. And it's like, how is Captain America not screaming at the table, hitting both Tony and General Ross over the head with his shield, saying, none of this has anything to do with us, take these accords and shove them up your ass? Should have been the appropriate response. And in that one, when he's like, I'm never going to testify and everything, and he says it I know he says it to the wife first, but I think he also says it to TJ. How TJ didn't throw him off the balcony, I'll never know. Because that should have been the response. You know what I mean?
Oh, I would agree with you 100% on that.
I talked about the bowling one, where I was just kind of, at that point, there was other stuff going on with me, so I was just sort of out of it. But I just didn't like the episode. Who is the ugly German lady? I liked it. It was fine. I just don't think it was as good as the second half of the season.
No. That was a fine enough episode. The fellow who played Tony's old cellmate in that, good Lord, I'll forget his name, unfortunately. He's another one of those great character actors.
Wasn't he on the Drew Carey show?
I was going to say, I mostly remember him for playing Drew's cross-dresser brother.
Yes. We talked about the supermodel one. That's one where I enjoyed the episode, but Tony's so dumb in that one where I'm like, he's so full of his own ego and his own shit that, you think your charm won over this supermodel. It's like, ugh, you poor dumbbell.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I'll share a personal experience of this. So I would liken it to almost the same feeling you get when, like, you're a kid and, like, you're eating out at dinner somewhere. And now, Mark, your parents stayed together for a while there. Mine didn't. So my dad was a single dad for a while. And, like, we would be out eating dinner somewhere, and, like, he would be talking to the waitress and hit on her, who was completely out of his league. And I would just sit there and just put my hands in my face. Like, you idiots, what are you doing? And, like, I felt, one, horrible for me because I'm embarrassed. Two, horrible for the girl that she has to put up with it. Because even at a young age, I knew these people worked on tips. And it's so cringy. And, like, that's how I felt, like, watching that go down.
Yeah, I get that. Parents are still together, by the way. Going on a lot of years together. There were a lot of ups and downs. But, yeah, I can only imagine wanting to just hide under the table. But I thought, out of the first 4 or 5 episodes, I thought that one was at least the best one. The first episode, I stayed with it, and I'm glad I did. But this is one that could make or break a lot of viewers. Like, if you watch the first one, and if you're like me, you're like, I'm not so sure about this, I can see why people might not have kept going. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think this was a great one to start with.
My rule of thumb is I give a show, unless it's the worst thing I've ever seen, I usually give a show 4 to 5 episodes to win me over. I give it a month's worth of development, basically, to, hook me or not. At that point, I'll tune out. There's very few shows where I've given up on an episode. And that episode has to be just the worst thing I've ever seen for me to never want to see it again. This first episode, it wasn't the worst first episode I've seen, but it certainly didn't have me craving more. It was one of those ones where I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to see where this goes. And I would almost liken it in that sense to, people who know me know that the middle of the show, Parks and Rec, from the second season through I believe the next to last season is the 6th. I love those years of the show. The first season of the show is abominable to me. The last season of the show is even worse to me.
The two best examples I can give of that sort of thing are The Simpsons and Family Guy, where those early episodes are not easy to get through. Like, Family Guy definitely, they had some actor changes. I think they started off with a modern take on, like, the Flintstones, and then they kind of followed the same pattern as The Simpsons, where The Simpsons started off with a more competent, smarter, but angry Homer. But Bart was the focus of the show. Then they made Homer practically retarded and made the focus on him. The show got 100 times better, and then it became more of a like South Park did, more of just a social commentary, more of a political parody of American life. And then and that's when the show really got legs and has been on for like 100 years now. Family Guy followed the same pattern where Peter's sort of a modern Fred Flintstone, and then they just decided to make him a complete retard. And the show even got canceled for a while, and they made a joke about that when they brought it back. But when they made the switch to Peter's an idiot and Lois is kind of a horrible human being, and they're just kind of stuck in the mud together. But it also became kind of a parody, and then they did a lot. They switched from it being a focus on Peter with Brian as his conscience to Brian's a shitty person too, and he was teaming up with Stewie. That's when that show took off, and it's been pretty funny ever since. With this one, I can't see where they really made a change. I just think the writing got to the point where I almost agree with you, where I'm wondering if these were not shown in the order they were produced. But yeah, I mean, I can see this one being where they wanted to start with, and this one's kind of a 50-50 for me. But I think you're right. I think if you're willing to give it a chance and you get to those latter episodes, I think it's the one where I think when I got to the Bob Saget episode, that's when they hooked me. I'm like, wow, the writing is actually better than I thought it was going to be with this, and I was willing to stay with it for longer. I think also Tony is less of a shithead in those latter half of the season than he is in the first half. The first half, he kind of comes across as more unlikable than likable, and then it switches towards the end.
Right, and then you have his arc kind of gets more legs, too, in terms of trying to find the guy responsible for his late wife's murder.
Right. And then they leave you with an unfortunate cliffhanger. I don't know if you've... Oh, God, what was the name of it? There was a show that was shot, I think, down in Florida. That was... It was about... Oh, gosh. It was called The Glades, I believe it was. And
was it on USA?
Yeah.
Or no, A&E.
A&E, you're right. And that one got... that was a cliffhanger ending, but then they canceled the show, so you never found out who shot the guy. This has an unfortunate cliffhanger ending as well, where he finds out that his wife wasn't just killed; she was murdered, and it was a hit on her because he finds the pictures of her, and then the money that was that was the payoff and everything. And so, what to do now that he has this information and this money from the dead murderer? And we'll never know. I'm actually surprised TNT didn't pick this up. TNT. Who was home to shows like The Last OG, which I don't know how that made it to cable television and not like paid subscription TV like HBO or something, given the language on that show. But I don't know if you've watched it before, but it's actually not bad.
I've caught an odd episode here or there. I think it was the one where he tried to explain to his son's class about how white privilege is a myth or whatever, and they end up staging a sit-in and getting arrested.
That must be the second season because I don't remember that in the first.
I saw that. I think I saw one other, but yeah, that to me seems much more like a show that we would see on Netflix along the lines of like Master of None or Kimmy Schmidt versus this, which, like we said at the beginning of the show, this is a broad appeal show that's much more like network friendly.
Yeah, like TNT. It's funny how the world works. TNT got rid of World Championship Wrestling because they wanted to be more upscale, and they wanted to bring on more upscale programming. Same thing with TNT was going to be the drama network, and TBS was going to be the comedy network, and they wanted to get rid of wrestling because that was too lowbrow. Now TNT has AEW. Speaking of lowbrow, and they don't. And they don't pick up a show like this, which is perfect for TNT or TBS. You can go either way. This fits in kind of both categories. Yeah,
I thought this would have been, based on their history in working with Andy, I thought this would have been a surefire pull for USA. Yeah, because he had Monk with them. He had Psych with them.
Yeah, USA would have been a good one.
Because they've consistently had some type of programming like this on for the past decade. And until like in the past 3 years, I would say they've really gone to focusing more on dramas. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I haven't really been a fan of any of the drama stuff they've put out, as far as Suits or White Collar, the Queen of the South. I haven't gotten into any of that, and I've watched them all. But honestly, I don't think USA does them well. I think they have a knack for comedy. I think Sirens was a show they could have kept going and didn't, unfortunately. But I thought that was a great show. I thought most of their comedy stuff, like Monk, like Psych, like they do that well, and they should have stuck to that.
So, funny you should mention TBS and Andy Breckman. The Misery Index is an upcoming television series developed by TBS. The program, which is based on the card game Shit Happens, created by Andy Breckman, will be hosted by Jamila Jamil and stars members of the Tenderloins comedy troupe.
Okay.
So I guess that's what Andy Breckman's doing instead.
Swing and a miss for me, Andy.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be watching this one.
But everybody's got to work.
Yeah, you definitely got to pay that mortgage.
I can't wait till we do the game show revival episode.
What are we talking about now?
Of TV Party Tonight. With all these terrible game shows they've resurrected for God knows what reason.
We'll talk about it. All right.
Are we really clamoring for Joker's Wild People?
I mean, other than cooking competitions, I'm obsessed now with Bong Appetit. For not being a pothead, I do enjoy my shows about pot. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast. I'm going to give you the last word here. I think we've talked this enough, but in case there's anything that we missed that you wanted to get to, any last words here on The Good Cop?
I'll say, so from a personal standpoint, it's very cool to see some of the locations they're in, because they're places I either grew up or hung out in several instances. And then you get disappointed because when they go to like the interior of some of these places, it's very clearly a soundstage. So, for example, the cop bar that they always hang out in the show is Farrell's. Farrell's is located in Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn. It is where my dad hung out, my uncles hung out, my grandfather hung out. My teachers from school hung out there when they were kids because, you could go there. It actually was just in the news because it was the last bar using styrofoam containers prior to the city ban that those fucking bastard mayor and governor put into place. Liberal morons, because freedom, nope. But it was noted for the container, which we all called in the neighborhood the Farrellizer. But they use that as the backdrop as their regular cop hangout bar. and then they shoot the interior of it, and it's like, that's not Farrell's, that's a soundstage.
Right.
And so that's a little disappointing.
It looks like the bar in Brooklyn Nine-Nine that they all hang out in.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I think this is one that had definite potential. We never got to experience it, and it's a shame. But I think it's speaking more to what you can expect out of Netflix, in that Netflix wants to do these niche audience shows like your Orange is the New Black, like your Glow, like your Stranger Things, which dropped today. Like these are the types of shows they want to do because they are essentially drawing a fragmented audience that will have to pay for the service versus wanting to do this and maybe compete with basic cable type audiences who will not subscribe to the service for one show that has broad appeal.
You know, Netflix right now, Netflix, which was the provider of streaming services and new content and interesting content, now has to compete with the upcoming Warner Brothers, which is going to incorporate DC Universe and their whole library of feature films and whatnot and television products. I mean, Warner Brothers, when they have their own streaming service, is going to be a force to contend with. And oh, by the way, Disney Plus comes online in November, which has all of Lucasfilm, Marvel, Pixar, and Disney. You know, plus all of their new exclusive content, and part of Hulu, by the way. So
yeah, I can't wait till all of these streaming services wind up the bubble burst like the .com industry, and everybody just gets cable again.
Well, that's the thing. I think what you're going to see closer to that is people will pick and choose the 2 or 3 streaming services that they want, and some of these are going to either have to combine with other streaming services, and you're going to get these like monster services, or they're all going to just kind of just barely survive because you're going to have this long tail of fragmentation. You're going to have people who are more sports oriented. They'll pay for the ESPN Plus or possibly the whole Disney Plus package that incorporates ESPN and DAZN and the shit like that. But they're not paying for fucking Hulu, for Netflix and Warner Brothers, et cetera, et cetera. You have the people that are into movies that will pay for it, but they're not paying for the sports ones. So that's more of what I see happening. I just see an utter fragmentation of the television streaming services. I don't see a lot of people sticking with cable because what I'm finding, just kind of, in my own little niche of friends, is that a lot of them just don't want to pay for cable anymore. But they're willing to just... Here's the thing. I'm finding that people watch particular shows. They don't watch, quote-unquote, TV. And so they'll just pay for the one thing that gives them the 1 or 2 shows that they want to watch or the sports they want to watch, and that's it. But they don't want to pay for the big TV package. So we'll see what happens. But I don't think you're totally wrong in the sense of there being a bubble bursting. I think at some point that you're gonna see the bigger streaming services swallow the smaller ones. You're not gonna see this utterly long tail of endless small fucking streaming services that are paid for. I think at the very least this is going to go to more of a commercial model, to where the app itself is free, but you're going to have to either pay for the first tier. You either get the free tier with the commercials or pay for a VIP tier that has no commercials in it, kind of like the way Hulu does it now. Pat, if there's one thing, you wanted me to watch The Good Cop. Took me a while, but I got there. What do you want me to watch next?
Well, based on the discussion we've had today, Stranger Things.
If I watch it, will you talk about it with me?
I will talk about it with you.
Should I start with
all 3 seasons?
Should I get myself caught up with all 3 and then we'll talk about all 3, or should we do one at a time?
I'll leave that in your court. I will say there's a lot that goes on, so it may be more effective to break them up. But they're all worth watching, and I can't recommend it enough.
Well, I will have plenty of time on my hands over the next few weeks, so I will watch them, and then I will get back to you. In the meantime, we've had fun this week. We had a TV party for Fighter Fest. We had a new member of the Radulich and Broadcasting commentary team here, Mr. TMC, who does wrestling reviews on his Facebook page. You can go ahead and check that out. We did Jessica Jones Volume 2, The Secret of Maria Hill, on source material. We had Robert and I, who started off doing an okay review of Jessica Jones Season 3, and then got into a screaming match over the transgender character. It's not what you think. I cried because they made a point of calling her a transgendered character when she was just a transgendered actress playing a character. But, listen to the review to hear us argue about that. Yeah, that's kind of what his argument was. Why are we talking about this? I said, because it needs to be talked about. That's why. Myself and Jesse Starcher reviewed the new Glory Hammer. That was fun. This week,
Mark, did you happen to listen to that band I recommended?
Iron Cross. It's on the list.
Okay.
This week, coming up on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, provided I'm not hallucinating or under such bad flu conditions that I can't record, we'll be doing a source material on the Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 4 Legacy. We're reviewing Spider-Man Far From Home. Hey, Pat, what did you think of Far From Home?
That's terrible.
I was hoping you were going to say it stinks.
I'll leave Jay Sherman that line. That movie doesn't deserve the Jay Sherman line. It was just awful.
Fair enough. We've got Amon Amarth this Wednesday on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And then if Sean's got his stuff together, we'll do an on-trial for Spider-Man 3. Sunday, July 14th, is Extreme Rules. At some point during the day, on the 15th, I believe, we will review Extreme Rules, WWE Extreme Rules, or maybe later that night. It depends on my condition and whoever else can get to record it with me. And then on the 15th, Monday, we'll be doing a source material on the 2016 iteration of Doom Patrol, Volume 1, the trade paperback entitled Brick by Brick.
Yes.
Damn You Hollywood, Robert Winfrey, Alexis Hana, and Jason Teasley will be reviewing Crawl. I may be on that show, I may be not. Depends on whether or not I'm out of the hospital. And
just to let everyone know, Extreme Rules is buy one, get one free tickets.
Woo! If I can get to the movies to see Crawl, I'll jump in on that show. If not, it'll just be those three fine people. We've got the Texas Hippie Coalition on the 17th on the Metal Hammer of Doom. Jesse and I will be reviewing Doom Patrol Season 1 from DC Universe. And myself and Pat Mullin will be doing a commentary for Plant vs. Lee on Fox. It's on Fox. We've got Cloak and Dagger, Shades of Grey on source material, July 22nd. The Lion King on the 23rd.
Mark, don't you want people to listen to these shows?
People do listen to these shows, despite how horrible you think they are. The topics are. We've got Sabaton, The Great War on July 24th. And then a TV party for Cloak and Dagger on the 25th. And finally, before my voice completely gives out, we've got DC Hanna-Barbera 3, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, L7 Scatter the Rats, and for Christ's sakes, On Trial, Pulp Fiction.
We're reviewing an L7 album.
Yeah, I love it. I loved L7 back in the 90s.
We're reviewing L7 now.
Yep, in 2019. I want people to remember, Pat. Remember the wargasm.
Remember them flinging their used rag into a crowd. How about that?
We'll definitely remind them of that. I'm sure Jesse would love to hear that story. All right, what do you got going on these days? What are you doing with yourself?
Pat's got a lot of things going on, unfortunately not usually podcast related. Pat's doing a little bit of moving, so this next couple of weeks is going to be a little bit hectic for me. We're going to make time, though, for some fight calling on the 20th of this month. May or may not be able to join for an Extreme Rules cast if there is one. Tremendous amounts in the past world, and I'm sorry about that. I basically kind of pick and choose and wait for these things to come up, and then criticize Mark for most of his choices, and rightly so, such as you've heard.
Pat's always there to remind me that my calendar stinks. Which is
Yeah, like, why are we doing TV parties for the crown? Why aren't we watching BJ and the Bear? It's a concept I can't get enough of. A man and his monkey.
We should do a Long Road to Ruin for the Iron Eagle trilogy.
There's 4, Mark. There's not 3.
We should do a Long Road to Ruin for the 4 Iron Eagle movies.
That would also imply that they're ruined at some point, which is not the case.
We'll get you on more shows here, Pat. We'll find shit you like, I promise.
Louis Gossett Jr.'s in all of them.
I don't know what those will be coming up in the near future, but we'll figure something out for you.
No, so here's the deal, guys. I want feedback from our listeners here. I had pitched to Mark the idea of doing a show where I watch very testosterone. Or Mark, myself, a few of the other regulars, we watch very testosterone-laden movies and give heartfelt reviews of them. So let us know what you think. Do you like movies where guys blow things up and have biceps that range from 19 to 24 inches? Do you like stuff where guys get the girl and still kick the bad guy in the teeth? And yeah, the guys we watch only want girls. Real sorry, not sorry. We fight communists.
I'm into this. I want to do like Cobra and Iron Eagle. I'm into this. You got to give me dates and movies that you're available.
Well, I'm pretty much available all the time for the most part, and I've given you a list of movies here and there.
All right. Well, we're gonna get this finalized. We're gonna make this happen because I would love to do another movie review show, and I like this idea of doing a potentially calling it like the toxic masculine movie cast. I think that's perfect.
All right. Well, you've spoken. Let's hear some feedback from our listeners. I'm sure all our trans, bi, queer, lesbian listeners are in.
Hey, if you liked us talking about She-Ra, Princess of Power, you'll love it when we talk about Cobra. All right, let's get out of here. So I want to thank Pat for joining me tonight on this impromptu podcast on July 4th. For those of you that got a chance to listen, hope you enjoyed your July 4th. Hope you didn't do like my son did and burn his hand on a fucking sparkler. All right, as you can see, my voice is going, so be well, be safe, and behave.